Hey, feeling good, like I should. When in dark, walk around the neighborhood, feeling blessed.
Alrighty, let's take a look and see what we've got here. Every one of these first 6 problems of the study guide have to do with triangle sum theorem. So when you add up the 3 angles, the total of all 3 of them have to add up to 180 degrees. So in this case, you would take your 60 plus your 75, which is 135, and then subtract that from 180 to give you 45. Here you've got 80 plus 65 is 145. Subtract that from 180, and you get 35. And here, this isn't somewhat interesting, but I think you probably understand it pretty well. You've got 2 x's here, plus the 100 has to equal 180. So really, the 2 x's have to add up to 80. Since these 2 combined have to be 80 and they're both the same, that means that each one of them has to be 40. Same idea applies here. You got, you take 180 minus 112, you're going to get 68. So if these 2 are equal to 68, that means that each one of them has to be 34. And then in the case of these, there'd be different ways to think about this. If you know that's 60 and that's 60, then this has to be 60, correct? So you could say 4x plus 10 is equal to 60. That's eventually where you're going to get with this. So, but I'll just add them all together. So you know you've got 60 plus 4x plus 10 is equal to 180. Take those guys. That's what I mean. This is 120. So if you subtract away the 120, you get your 4x plus 10 was equal to 60, which means that 4x's have to be equal to 50. And so 50 divided by 4 will give you your answer. 50 divided by 4 is 12.5, must be the value for x there. And same applies here. 8x minus 60 is eventually going to have to be equal to 60. And I think some people have said 0 for the answer, but if that was 0, then this would have to be negative 60. And there's no way you can have an angle measure that's a negative. So 8x minus 60 is supposed to be equal to 60. So we'll add 60 each side. That means that 8 x's have to be equal to 120. And then when you divide 120 by 8, you will get 15 degrees. So triangle sum theorem, based on what I saw with your checks for understanding, I think most of you feel pretty good about that. Here we're getting into some angle relationships, noting that here you've got vertical angles. So that means that they're going to be equal to each other. So you simply set up 3x is equal to 45. Well, what do you multiply times 3 to give you 45? It must be 15. Here, same idea, vertical angles. 5 times x has to be equal to 125, so you take 125 divided by 5 and you get 25. And then here there's supplementary angles, so I will actually work this one out. You're going to have this plus that has to equal 180. So 5x plus 12 plus 68 must equal 180, and 12 plus 68 is 80 itself. So when you subtract that from the 180, you are going to get 5x's. Now that's supposed to be 80, isn't it? It's supposed to be 100. So that means that x has to be 20. So if you check it, 5 times 20 is 100. 100 plus 12 is 112. And then is 112 plus 68 equal to 80? Yes, it is 180. So there we go. Here, same idea. These 2 have to add up to 180. So it's going to end up being 10x plus 130 equals 180. So that means that 10x's had to be equal to 50 when you took away the 50 or 130 from each side. It's eventually how you get x is equal to 5. Here, another triangle sum theorem where if that's 90 degrees, you know these 2 have to be 90 degrees. And if that's 30 degrees, that means that this guy has to be equal to 60, right? 30, 60, 90 adds up to 180. So I'm just going to say 19x plus 3 is equal to 60, which means that 19x's have to be equal to 57. And 57 divided by 19 is 3, so that has to be equal to 3. And same idea here, but what are we going to get here? We're going to get 58 plus what? That's almost 60, right? So this is going to be 32. So if 3x's is equal to 32, take 32 divided by 3, and you get 10 2/3, or 10.6. Problems 13, 14, and 15 now. What is the relationship between these angles here? Those are corresponding angles, correct? Which means they're corresponding angles, they're both obtuse, they're congruent to each other. Since these two lines are parallel, the corresponding angles will be equivalent. So in a situation like this, you're simply going to say that the 20x plus 2 has to be equal to 142. Subtract 2 from each side. 20x's is equal to 140, which means x has to be equal to 7. Here, what do we have? Same idea there. Those two are congruent to each other. So if you have 20x minus 2 is equal to 38, 20x's have to be equal to 40, adding the 2 to each side. So that means that x must be equal to 2 there. In this last situation, looks like these two are congruent to each other because they're alternate interior angles. Parallel line, here's a transversal. This acute angle will be equal to this acute angle. So 7x plus 3 has to be equal to 52. Take away 3 from each side, and that means that 7x's must be equal to 49. And therefore, x has to be equal to 7. So, oh, no, we've got some more. I did not realize we have some more. Okay, so what do we have here? Alternate interior angles, making these two guys equal to each other. Subtract 3 from each side, divided by 5. 125 divided by 5 is 25. And here you've got the exterior angle theorem, which says that when you add the two remote interior angles, it will equal that one. So 23 and 58 make 81. Here, I guess we're solving for x, since 8x plus 57 has to be equal to 117. So I'll go ahead and solve that one. 8x plus 57 is going to be equal to 117. So when you subtract 57 from each side, you get 8x's has to be now equal to 60. Divide 60 by 8, and what do you get? 60 divided by 8 is 7.5. So this x has to be 7.5 right there. These three, that angle similarity, we didn't really talk about these too much. So if you didn't understand how to do these, that's fine. It's not going to be on the test. But basically, if you got two sides, there's a rule in geometry that says if you got two sides that are equal to each other, then these angles have to be equal to each other. So this is an isosceles triangle, and that means that 5x plus 36 has to be equal to 9x. So 36 has to be equal to 4x's, which means that x has to be equal to 9. Here, these are equal to each other, which means the corresponding sides are going to be equal to each other. So that means that 8x minus 12 has to be equal to 12x minus 18. So I'm going to take away 8x's from each side and add 18 to each side. 6 is equal to 4 times x. So 6 divided by 4 is 1.5. So each one of those has to be equal to 1.5. And since all three of these are equal to each other, that means that all three sides are going to be equal as well. So that makes 8x minus 18 equivalent to 5x plus 3. So what shall we do? Take away 5x's from each side and add 18 to each side. 3x's is equal to 21, so x has to be equal to 7. Okay, so I highly recommend that you focus on triangle sum theorem, focus on these rules for corresponding and alternate interior angles, supplementary angles. Learn all of this. Probably the only thing you don't need to focus on are these problems with angles, similarity with triangles. All right, I hope You did well on this. Remember, go back, look through all the different lessons, look through the M&Ms, watch this video again to see what my explanations are. If I went too quickly over a problem and you didn't really get my explanation, just send me an email. I'll send you a response that explains it all. All right, good luck with everything. There's going to be a test tomorrow, so make sure that you're prepared. Take care. Bye.
Hey, feeling good, like I